Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make some brief comments on this very important bill, the Cooperative Bill of 2024. Mr. Speaker, these three distinguished senators who are here were with me in the last parliament when we passed one piece of legislation which I was always praying, and yourself, Mr. Speaker, that it could be implemented. This is the Warehousing Receipt Bill. Mr. Speaker, we are poor because we are not able to coordinate and to be able to make sure that we take care of our produce. When today I saw this cooperative bill, I decided that I will come and make some contribution which will allow me to be able to at least guide, the debate on this bill, because sometimes I think we try to over-legislate. And we're in the business of creating offices for certain individuals. One of the biggest problems that I have with any piece of legislation that comes up is that there is an establishment of the director of cooperatives in the national level. There is establishment of a director of cooperative in the county level. I've had a very negative experience, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of cooperatives, because the process is selective, it is predetermined, and once you become selective in the process of registering a cooperative society, and when you predetermine how even the bylaws should be drafted, that is a recipe for disaster. If, Mr. Speaker, we had fully implemented the Warehousing Receipt Act, today the farmers in Narok would not be using empty fields to be able to dry their wheat, would be able to put money, send money into county governments, set up warehouses, set up silos, set up dryers, so that the moisture content in wheat can be one that these millers can be able to come and buy, and farmers would be able to benefit. Today, when we come here with a very long bill, I'm still reading it, which has got about 284 pages long. My only conclusion is that we are actually going the wrong direction. We are over-legislating. We talk about devolution. Agriculture is devolved. By and large, when you try to interrogate this bill, Mr. Speaker, it talks about produce. How people can come together, work together to be able to produce. Today, we have a cabinet secretary in charge of cooperatives. But this bill wants to set up a director of cooperatives in the national level. Then what is the job of that cabinet secretary if we have a director in the national level? Agriculture is devolved. Health is devolved, but we are still clawing back on devolution. Mr. Speaker, I think this House, when it comes to the third reading of this bill, or the committee of the whole, we must go through the bill and scrutinize it. Go through the bill with a toothpick to ensure that, number one, we do not over-legislate. Number two, we do not create offices for particular individuals who will be living large, collecting money from farmers or members of a cooperative. They drive big SUVs, live in Karen, yet the farmers themselves struggle in terms of developing their produce, storing that produce, and then once they sell is where now these directors come and say, we want our levy. I've always had a problem, Mr. Speaker, with the Kenya Dairy Board, because I think it is completely misplaced. It doesn't understand the challenges that farmers go through. It doesn't understand the adulteration of the milk in this country. It doesn't understand the challenges that women in our counties face when they don't have a proper cold chain. I wish that Kenya Dairy Board was investing heavily in developing a good, cold chain, so that when a farmer milks, takes it directly to the cold chain and doesn't have to go through brokers. We must stop over-legislating. I wish this bill was talking about a process where the government will invest in the farmers, give subsidies to the farmers, set up cooperatives for free for farmers. Mr. Speaker, when in fact, I even spoke to the Cabinet Secretary. I was trying to register a cooperative in Narok. But the rounds and circles that I was taking, Mr. Speaker, I just ended up registering a limited liability company. And then I say, based on how I work with the farmers, I can give shares. So sometimes it's a bit frustrating. What we need to do is to sit down with the county governments. I would support the proposal of setting up a county director of cooperatives. And this office of the county director of cooperatives, not the national director of cooperatives, a county director of cooperatives. Let the cabinet secretary deal with the issues of cooperatives. When we go down to the county level, we can have a CCM in charge of agriculture who then appoints a director of cooperatives. When you appoint the director of cooperatives, you ensure the CCM or the CEO in charge of cooperative ensures that every county budgets for money that is supposed to build these cooperative movements. Mr. Speaker, about 10 years ago, I traveled to Brazil, and I went to study the cooperative system there. And I was mesmerized, Mr. Speaker. And that is when we came to debate the warehousing receipt bill then, which is an act now, at least everything to me was making sense. Cooperative movements in countries like Brazil, Mr. Speaker, have their own community banks where farmers, they have their own warehouses, they bring their produce, it's a cooperative. They have their membership there. It is not a matter of a big government, but rather a small government. But in this case, which seems to be misadvised in terms of where you want government to be in every little pocket, a big government is not going to be able to help us. Creating a job for a director of cooperatives nationwide is not going to help us. The first thing we should do is to ask county governments, can you set up cooperative movements? In Narok County, we have 6 constituencies. We know what does well in Emurwedikir. We know what does well in Kilgoris. We know what does well in Narok South, Narok West, Narok East, and Narok North. Before I entered here, I was meeting with gentlemen from Narok North. Of course, they were disgruntled because of land issues. Some of them who were left out when Mao Forest was being surveyed. And they still have a genuine case. But these people are farmers. They produce wheat, barley. The most important thing is to bring them together, make sure they have a good silos to store those produce, make sure they have good dryers, not to be selling them to brokers who then come and turn part of Narok Central into a drying field. There's a place called El Mashariani. Before you get into Narok town, Mr. Speaker, literally 2 kilometers before you get into town, you will see some makeshift silos, but people don't even use those silos because of the moisture content. Then you will see a field which is about 20 acres. And during the harvesting season, Mr. Speaker, that field will be littered with just, grains. Down about 1 kilometer away, there's a Kenya Cereals and Produce Board. So people come individually, they come, they dry their wheat there. Once the wheat the moisture content has reduced is where now they sell and they take it to the silos for the millers to be able to come and buy. We need to do things differently and not only come up with such a huge bill, but develop legislation that can actually encourage a small government rather than a big government. Legislation that will ensure that it creates wealth rather than overburden farmers. When today the dairy board is saying, oh, you need to pay this levy. Tomorrow, with this act, you know, these cooperative members have got to pay money. Why? We are being overtaxed on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the 4-tier structure of these cooperatives, for me, is really a lot of bureaucracy for nothing. Why do you have to create 4 tiers? It is like the other piece of legislation we were discussing here the other day, Mr. Speaker, that now requires, I think it was the coffee bill, that now requires that a buyer be registered, be licensed, a seller be licensed, a broker be licensed. You're actually stifling innovation. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're living at a time when artificial intelligence is guiding the future. Tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, I'll be meeting students who we're sponsoring to be able to study agribusiness. Cooperative is one of the subjects that we are going to be discussing. But if tomorrow now I have to sit down and tell them, we have a bill that is proposing to have a 4-tier structure for cooperative movements, I'm sure most of them will be like, for what? If we had a database of how many cooperatives we have in this country, in Narrow County, for instance, and say we have 20 cooperative movements. Cooperative number 1 is for wheat farmers. Cooperative number 2 is for dairy farmers. Cooperative number 3, tea farmers. Cooperative number 4, livestock farmers. Then the next question we ask, how much are we supporting these cooperatives? Mr. Speaker, we had the Cabinet Secretary here the other day in charge of gender, and the subject of the day was the issue of women enterprises. If there is a way that we can be able to make sure that any piece of legislation we develop, we tie in all these government resources. There's a lot of money, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the agricultural ministry today. When the government wants to give coolers, they use the Ministry of Livestock. Can we find a way, similar to the way the Disaster Management Office used to work, where it was coordinating services from each and every ministry, so that when disasters strike, they support from the Ministry of Gender, they support from the Ministry of Housing, they support from the Ministry of Local Government then. Right now, if you're telling me that this cooperative, being a member of cooperative, gives you priority, and that becomes your security or your collateral, when you are applying for a loan from the Women Enterprising Fund, I'll be the first one to clap and say, now, that is progressive. That is building, creating wealth. But there's no nexus between this piece of legislation and the other piece of legislation. This department and the other department. We've heard of this notion that the minister actually said it here, that it's an all-government approach. Meaning, as a cabinet secretary in charge of interior, or as a cabinet secretary in charge of agriculture, if you go to a place, you should be in a position to respond to the issues being raised by that community or by those citizens. Any piece of legislation that we draft now should not be one that continues creating jobs for people, but for making things to happen. We need to be clear now that we are no longer in a unitary state of governance. We're in a devolved state of governance that does not require everything to be coordinated by the cabinet secretary. In other countries, Mr. Speaker, I'll give an example of the United States of America. They have school districts. I lived in Massachusetts, and in Concord has their own school district. You know, they get support from the federal government, they get support from the state government, they get support from the local government. But the way I see us moving ahead, it is like we are completely confused. It is like the national government always want to have control. I really do wish that sometimes my colleagues in the National Assembly would take time to read the pieces of legislation that they propose. Because once you read through these pieces of legislation, then you can be able to say and tell that we're in a different era. We are no longer at a time when everything has got to be controlled from a central level. Let us devolve everything. The agriculture is devolved. It is it's the backbone of this economy. These cooperative movements, Mr. Speaker, since I see my majority leader is, and I think the time is up, I'd wish that I could really speak on this. But this will be the first bill, Mr. Speaker, that I will seek your eye during the third reading, so that I can be able to really try to make sure that I make sense out of it. But otherwise, with those few remarks, let me allow the majority leader to make his remarks.
Thank you very much, Senator. I call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for indulging me. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if